It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome, welcome. It's the Jill on Money radio show. I am Jill Schlesinger, and I am delighted that you are spending part of your early July weekend with us. Us means me and executive producer Mark Talercio, the best executive producer or producer, associate producer, whatever producer you need. He's the best in the world. That's the deal. And we are broadcasting from the Capital One Bank virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? This is the program that attempts to take the mystery out of your financial life. And you know, we have a lot of ways that we try to do that. We give you information, we kind of catch you up on what's going on in the world. But the way that we often will do it is responding to your specific questions. So if you have a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. A couple ways to get in touch with us. The first, you can just send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. Easy, right? However, if you're on our website, if you're on the jillonmoney.com website because you've signed up for our free weekly newsletter or you're out to buy my book, maybe you just pick your head up and I have a question. And in that case, the contact button is in the upper right-hand corner. Easy, right? So send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. And it can be anything about your financial life. You know, we're just days before the tax filing deadline. So maybe it's a tax question. Maybe it's a question about your investments, but maybe it's a question about your career. I think that so many of the crossroads that we are facing in this time have to, you're weighing everything together. So I just had a friend who called me and said that she got basically booted from her company in a downsizing. But she was talking about, well, this is the time that maybe I'm going to launch this new business that I really wanted to do. And we talked about it. And of course, my number one thing was, how long do you have your health insurance through? That was the first question I asked. And she wasn't even thinking about health insurance. She was just thinking about all the money she was going to make. So if you've got different questions, whatever it is, anything remotely money related, give us a shout. That is what Dave did. He writes, love the show. I'm considering converting my traditional IRA into a Roth IRA this year, and I wanted to get your thoughts. Here is our situation. I was recently laid off from my job, so I expect to make significantly less money in 2020 than I did in 2019. Last year, my wife and I made about $285,000. This year, my wife should make $150,000, and I made $50,000 before I was laid off. If I max out unemployment, that'll be another $18,000. I'm shifting careers, so I don't expect to make much money in the new career this year. I estimate our combined household income will be around $225,000. So just so no one else has to do the math, I can do the math here. So that means they're squarely in the 24% top tax bracket for them, right? So the bracket begins at $171,051, goes up to just over $326,000. Okay. Back to the question. Dave writes, we have about $450,000 in retirement accounts right now, only $15,000 in a Roth 401k. The rest is pre-tax. I have about $50,000 in two traditional IRAs. The rest of my retirement money is in a 401k. Taking all these factors into account, it seems to me this is a good time to convert all $50,000 of my traditional IRAs into a Roth. I 100% agree. I'm signing on to this. But here's a little more additional information. I'm 44. My wife is 43. We've got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, 529s for both of them. Our expenses are way down because we just moved across the country to be closer to family. We're staying at my mom's house. I know, a 44-year-old staying with mommy. What a winner. They do have the cash to pay the taxes that would be due on the conversion. They've got a little bit less than $300,000 in savings. It may be completely nuts, but we'll use probably 35 to 45% of that for a house down payment within the next year. After that, we'll keep 6 to 12 months in expenses. and an emergency fund. I'll invest whatever's left over. Anyway, your thoughts on the conversion? Considering I'm going to make less money, the market's down significantly, and our retirement portfolio is overly weighted in pre-tax. This seems like a good time for the conversion. Looking forward to your feedback. I'm on board. Absolutely, positively. Go ahead and convert. Go ahead, pay the tax that's due. I don't mind you having money in the house down payment fund or even having a little extra cash, especially since you're career changing. So I think this is a fantastic game plan, and I'm signing up. Good idea. And for those of you listening, if you think you're going to be in a lower tax bracket this year, again, this is a great time to convert. And, there's no need to kill yourself to do the conversion on the 401k just yet. But I do think starting with the 50,000 in the IRAs, that makes a ton of sense. A ton of sense. Colleen writes that she wants to know whether refunds from universities would impact tax credits that were issued in 2019 or 2020. What can be done to offset credits? I've asked my accountant, my daughter's university. I haven't received a satisfactory response. Let me think about this. How would a refund from a university? I don't think that this is going to impact your tax credit. You mean the earned income tax credit or the tax credit for universities? I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the tax credit you receive for tuition. Well, here's what I would guess. No one knows yet because the IRS probably hasn't issued a actual opinion on this. And my guess would be that you're going to have to give the credit back, but don't worry about it. They'll figure out how to get the money back from you. I'll tell you that much. Okay. Eric writes, my wife and I don't know how to file online. I just got a computer this late April. Can we skip taxes till next year? No, you can't skip. What's more, we don't owe anything. We haven't owed anything for a long time to the IRS. We're both on Social Security. We make under $34,000 per year. We pay $936 per month for our medical insurance. I've got bad news for you, Eric. If you make $27,000 as a married couple and you're over 65, you got to file. So, I mean, look, you can file paper returns. It just may be that you won't hear from the government for a long time. So, maybe the best thing for you to do is this. I know that you don't know how to file online, but if you go to irs.gov, all you have to do, just type that in, irs.gov, and then click on do your taxes for free. And then you go into choose a free file online product. You click on that. So, because you make less than $69,000, okay? You can go click on any of these programs and they will walk you through this. I know it sounds horrible, but you will be able to do this. It's not that hard. It really is not. Free 1040 tax return. If your adjusted gross income is 69,000 or less and your age is 70 and younger and you live in any state except, I don't know where you live, which state, but you click on it and you'll walk through the program and it will be okay. I know it's hard. Maybe someone can help you. Maybe you get a younger relative to help you out. Thanks so much for writing, Eric. You're listening to Jill on Money, and if you have a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger helps you take the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you have a question, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is askjill@jillonmoney.com. askjill@jillonmoney.com. So, Mark, I put my proposal in for my next book. I don't know if anyone's going to actually want to buy this proposal, but I had to change the title because I was so excited about the title, and then it got squashed. My great title got squashed. The title that I wanted to create was to write under was "A Mask for Your Money: How to Survive a Pandemic or Any Financial Crisis. But somehow or other, when my agent read that, he thought masking money was like I was giving someone like cheating ways to hide money. Anyway, my dream is squashed. I'm going to still try to write it. We'll see. We'll see if I sell it, then I'll write it. If I'm not just writing it for the heck of it, though. No way. Too much work. Okay, if you've got a financial question or you would like to contribute to the book, How Did You Survive This Crisis? Send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. Okay, here is John's email. The subject is, will this plan work? Pay down mortgage first, then invest in index funds or real estate. Hello, Jill and Mark. I discovered your podcast about 3 months ago and enjoy listening to your analysis. I've been grateful for the daily podcast during the COVID pandemic. I've been doing a lot of financial research, reading books, listening to podcasts over the last 36 months, as my wife and I have been trying to, quote, clean our financial house. We wanted to get your opinion on next steps for our financial journey. My overall goal is to diversify our savings and begin generating passive income to create wealth and a new financial legacy for our family. Boy, that word legacy, that's loaded for me, but okay. Here's the background. My wife is 38 years old. I am 40. We are both fortunate to work in the biotech industry in the greater Boston area. We've got a combined annual income of $208,000, which puts us at the 24% federal tax bracket, 5.5% Massachusetts state tax. We've got 2 boys, age 5 and 2, and we still pay for daycare and after school care. It costs about $1,900 a month. Yowza. Okay. Listen to this, Mark. In 28 months, we have paid off $92,000 in debt in just over 2 years. Credit cards, student loans, and 2 vehicles. I'm astounded. That is fantastic. Right now, our only liability is our mortgage. It is a $231,000 note, and it's an FHA loan and fixed at 3.75%. We pay about $1,844 a month. That includes our homeowner's insurance, escrow for property taxes, and our PMI. Our credit scores are both in the 750 range. All right, here we go. We've saved $22,000 in a money market account. That's our 3-month emergency fund. We keep about $1,200 in 2 other savings accounts and $1,000 in cash. We elected to have only 3 months as we are in biotech and we can find employment quickly if anything bad were to happen in regards to our employment. I just want to note here, there's no downside for you to have 6 months. So immediately, I just want you to know that I disagree with that analysis. Even if it's something bad were to happen in employment, what if something were bad to happen to you? What if one of you couldn't work? What if it were something like that? In which case, I think you want 6 months. So I still stick to at least 6 months in your emergency reserve. That's my first piece of advice, John. Okay, they've recently increased retirement contributions to 15%. He has a Roth 401k worth about $169,000, gives me the allocation. He gets a match. His wife has a 401k through her job, and he recently learned they have a Roth 401k option for her plan. That's where the future contributions will go. Her 401k is $101,000. She's got a target date fund. Also, she has $11,000 in another IRA. We've set aside $100 per month per child since the birth of our sons into 529 accounts. They've got about, let's see, $8,900 and $2,900 respectively. Okay. Prior to increasing our retirement contributions up to 15% from 6%, I was able to set our budget so that we had a positive cash flow of about $1,500 to $2,000 a month. I estimate our cash flow will be reduced to about $500 to $750 a month with our increased contributions. Company provides life insurance for his base salary. He also has another term policy. She's got life insurance through her company, 2 times her base. Here's the plan. You ready? Our plan is to apply for a home equity loan or a HELOC to add a full dormer to our Cape Cod style home to allow our sons to share a room upstairs and build a half bathroom so that our house has room for their growth. Okay, sounds good. We're going to use cash flow to pay off the principal to our first mortgage each month. And blah, 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 blah. Okay, so he wants to do that. And then he wants to basically start saving money for a down payment for real estate. I think take a breath for a second. Why are you going to do a home equity loan to get a 20% down payment? Why not? Can't you? I first of all, I want to know, like, do you have equity in your home? You have $231,000 remaining on this house. I don't think you told me the value of the house. If you have enough equity to get a home equity line of credit, why not just refinance the whole thing? And therefore, you could refinance it, get the money out to dormer the house, have that money. And then what I would be very interested in seeing is kind of like, what's the cost? You'll get rid of your private mortgage insurance, hopefully, and go from there. As far as your plan about using your funds to invest in dividend performing stocks and also for a real estate in terms of creating some rental real estate opportunities, I'm kind of thumbs down on that. It takes a ton of work. It seems to me that you've got full-time jobs, you've got young kids. I don't know about buying real estate as an investment right now. And it's just a whole separate business. So my analysis of this would be, I mean, you've done an amazing job, so you're great savers. I would explore whether you could do a full on refi of the home in order to pay for the dormering of upstairs. And if not, I guess I would do a home equity line of credit. But if you can do a home equity line of credit, then you could do a refi. I think that's probably a better idea. Like take out the whole FHA product and move on. And then hopefully, it would be really much better to be there are some requirements, but look, if you have enough equity to get a home equity line of credit, you should have enough equity to refi this loan. And the rates are actually lower than they were. And if you're going to stay in this house for a while, I think it makes a ton of sense to try to get this done once and for all, one fell swoop, do your project, move on. Then going forward, I don't know, like I think it's dangerous to just pop into the whole real estate world without doing a lot of research. It seems like that may not be the greatest idea in the world. So, presuming that you guys are maxed out on your retirement accounts, you've got your 6 months, you're putting money into your 529 plans, that's all well and good. And then just a nice mix of index funds, that could be great. Just remember, if you're putting money into those index funds and they're dividend producing, it's going to spin off taxable income to you guys. So make sure that you actually have what you need in terms of like tax efficiency. And maybe that means you'll put more money, not just into retirement, but into the 529, because those are more tax efficient vehicles. Could be, I think that could be a better game plan, but it's a nice situation to be in. Congratulations on actually paying off all that debt. That's just huge. So well done. Okay, you're listening to Jill on Money. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com is our email address. We'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. This is the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. I got this great bit of information from the National Taxpayer Advocate, Erin Collins. She just started. Can you imagine? She just started amid the pandemic. Listen to this. Taxpayers who filed a 2019 paper return and are entitled to refunds may be in for a long wait. The IRS had to suspend the processing of paper returns. As of May 16th, it estimated it had a backlog of 4.7 million paper returns. Although the IRS is reopening some of its core operations, it's not clear when it can open and process all the returns sitting in mail facilities. How about that? Okay, wait a second. It gets even better. In addition, it's basically impossible to get a person. Okay, that's it. So there are automated lines, but there is no person that you can talk to. I'm so sorry for you. Next, check this out. The IRS has said that taxpayers are going to receive interest for these delayed refunds. How about this? When you look at this, I think that you'll be very happy not to have received your refund. The IRS says that they are finally going to pay for the privilege of holding on to your money. So the IRS says that because refunds are delayed, they're going to pay interest rates to taxpayers, and they're higher than your bank interest rates. 5% compounded daily for the money that's held in the second quarter, 3% compounded daily starting July 1st. How about that? It almost pays to have the IRS hang on to your money in this case, huh? That's pretty good. I thought you'd like that. So this is from Anonymous. Okay. Love your podcast. Thankful for all the thoughtful information you've been providing these past few months. By the way, for everyone listening to this radio show, we also have a podcast. The podcast, which we call the Coronavirus Market Update, it's daily. And if you want to get it, all you have to do is go to any place you could get podcasts. So that could be on Apple or Stitcher or Spotify or radio.com or Google Play, and just download it, Jill on Money, and you can get us every single day. Okay, let's get back to this question. What should I do with the proceeds from the sale of a home or our financial mess in general? Okay, let's find out what's going on here. These are risk-averse people. My wife and I are in escrow on our primary residence. If the sale goes through, we should net $450,000 with $207,000 of gain, so no taxes. We may buy another home in 2 to 3 years, probably for, I don't know, between $400,000 and $600,000. My God, that's a big range. Okay, here's the backstory. I'm 49. My wife is 51. We live in a no income tax state, Nevada. I am recently retired. I have a pension of $8,000 a month. I worked at a desk job crunching numbers. My wife does not work. I have free health insurance through a previous employer. I paid $550 per month for my wife's coverage. Wow, so cheap. We adopted 3 children, all 6 years old. Oh my God. We are working through adoption tax credits with about $37,000 remaining, 4 tax seasons to use it. We were told to convert our IRA to Roth or sell a rental, lots of depreciation, so leaning towards a conversion. We already converted some due to low tax bracket years ago. If kids go to college, we'll help with community college at first, then state school with them living at home. Okay, ready? Here's the messes. He's calling it a mess. I'm not saying. So there's no debt other than mortgage. That's not bad. Purchased a smaller replacement home base. Value $340,000. Oh, $199,000. Okay. Then there's 3 rentals. Then wife has an IRA of $445,000 and not manage ETFs. Wife has another $105,000 in a Roth. Money market liquid savings $90,000. All right. So all these rental properties, these 3 rental properties, it's a bit of a mess. But if this is what you're doing, they're clearing something around $1,400 a month for all 3. First of all, I would say, why on earth do you need to buy another home? If you're going to buy another home, I'm not sure. I mean, you could probably use your smaller replacement home, but what's the whole point of? I don't get this. I don't get why you need another home. Is that because you have the adoption going on? This is unclear to me. But if you need money in the next 2 years and you know it's for a home purchase, you've got to, and you say that you are risk averse, then I would tell you that you shouldn't put it at risk. Fine. Just then, pop it into a 2-year CD and be done with it. But the other opportunity you may have is that if you decide you don't actually want to buy another home. I guess that what you could do is you could pay down one of the mortgages on your rental property. It doesn't make the rental property work that well, but you do have a high interest rate on one of these mortgages, 5.875%. I might take 75 grand and pay that off. I think it might make sense to, at the very least, use some of the money, the 75 grand. I'd pay down that rental property number 3. The rest of it is a hot mess, but you're in it. And I'm not going to, I'm always the kind of person who says, why not sell a property and recapture the tax liability and pay for the tax liability? Now, you could, of course, certainly convert your retirement accounts, but unless you love these rental properties, just remember all of this is about taking advantage of the current tax rates that you are facing. I would even say this, you could go up to the 24% tax bracket. You're in the 22. You could either convert or sell a property that would make your adjusted gross income as high as $326,000. I would take advantage of that. I really would. So if that's a conversion, that's fine. If it's selling rental property just to clean up your life and make your life easier, that's fine too. But that's what you have to play with. That's the upper range of the tax bracket that you're in before you would jump to 32%, or even if you're in the 22 before. I think going up to 24 makes sense. That's what I would do, Anonymous, and some combination of either conversion, but I think maybe the rental stuff, that could really work. Okay, you're listening to Jill on Money, where I noodle through these ideas in my own head, talking it out with you, talking it out with Mark, and coming up with the best conclusion that we can provide for you based on the information we have. So if you've got a question, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address, askjill@jillonmoney.com. askjill@jillonmoney.com. Okay, Frank writes, love the podcast. I heard you on Stacking Benjamins one time and have never turned back. That's great. Okay, if you're into gut checks, I'm recently back out on my own and curious if you can tell me if I'm on track and or what to do as I look at my last 10 years of work life, hopefully. Okay, here's what Frank is writing about. Here's a situation. I'm 50 years old. I have an IRA with 350 grand in it. 401k has 320,000, 40% of which is after-tax money. It's in Transamerica, which, let me just say, candidly, stinks. It's probably in an annuity contract. Okay. Simple IRA, $5,000 at Fidelity, $50,000 in reserve. Social Security will be $3,700 a month, and I'll wait until age 70. Got to sell the house. I'll get 135 grand out of that. So, okay, good. Current goal is to have 6 grand a month of after-tax money to start living on at age 60 when I hope to retire. I'm maxing out my 401k and HSA. I usually get a bonus so I can drop 12 grand a year into retirement. 2 kids entering college in a few years, but we set enough aside to pay for the normal in-state tuition. So barring a Harvard acceptance, we should be covered there. LOL. Salary, 140 grand, usually get $20,000 bonus, but of course don't want to count on that. Sounds like you're in good shape to me. I'm looking at this IRA, so that's pre-tax, and it looks like, you are on track. I don't know about the 60. I don't know if you're going to actually get to the goal of generating that money that you need, because I think you would if you were waiting longer, but you're going to have that 10 years between 60 and 70, and you're going to have to drain a lot of money out of your account. in order to fund you for those 10 years until you do get your Social Security. So, in that respect, I think it's going to be tough for you. I encourage you to run some retirement calculators. There's something on Fidelity, of course. You can try a paid calculator, the esplanner.com, or the Choose to Save Ballpark Estimate that's a free one. There's a free one on the AICPA website. I would try those calculators first and see if you're on track. Okay. Okay, so there's also an extra question. It looks like Frank and his wife are actually getting divorced. And so he adds at the end, one lawyer question, if you don't mind. As part of the parting of ways and splitting up all of our assets, my wife, soon to be ex wife, has stock options with her company that will not vest until our divorce is over. Should we try to consider that as part of total assets that we divide when everything is split up 50-50? I'm assuming not. Okay. I don't think that because they're not vested, it's hard to actually consider them. And if I were her lawyer, I'd say, well, they have zero value, so no way. And if I'm your lawyer, I don't want to, then be on the hook if something changes. So I think they don't have a value now, so you can't really consider it. So he says, I got to find an advisor. So if you know anyone good, let me know. Okay. So find out where you're from. That would be helpful. But if you need an advisor, you could try to go to NAPFA, NAPFA.org. You can go to the CFP website, letsmakeaplan.org. And you may even want to use one of the hybrid advisor platforms like Vanguard Personal Service Advisor, Schwab Intelligent Portfolio, something like that, and give it a whirl. So I hope that helps, Frank, and thank you very much for writing. Okay, do we have another question here, Mark? I think we do. Here we go. Oh my God, this is too long. Long story short, let me do this quickly. This is Michael from Portland, Oregon. He and his wife are 34 years old. They've got a whole bunch of retirement accounts. And he says, is it beneficial to consolidate? Is there a benefit to leaving them separate? If we did consolidate, do we roll them into our current employer's retirement plan? Okay. Generally speaking, consolidation, it's not about saving money, but unless it could be about saving money if your current job's plan is a cheaper plan. But generally, it's just easier to manage. So, unless the plan is really lousy that you have right now, I'd roll everything into the current plan if possible. If not, if you've got a lousy plan, you can take your old accounts and put into place an IRA rollover account, one account, and then you can have every asset flow into the IRA rollover account and then have your current retirement plan separate. And if you're going to do that, then be sure to pick a place where you can have really cheap investing. So that would be like T. Rowe Price, TD Ameritrade, Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, anything like that, or any of those robo-advisors that I just mentioned. So hopefully that helps. I love consolidation. It does make sense. Okay, you're listening to Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, just send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. And we are broadcasting from the Capital One Bank virtual studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? It's so funny. I'm so cheap in some ways and so not in others. But one area where I'm very cheap is that I do like to pay cash at the gas station because it is such a huge differential. It's like 15 cents a gallon difference. So for that, I pay. I mean, that's nuts, right? That's just like too big a vig that I'm giving to anybody. So anyway, I use cash for that, and then I obsessively Purell my hands right after. I have a big, huge thing of Purell in the car. Anyway, that's it. All right, let's get to a question before we go to the second hour. Stephanie writes, "Hello, Jill. I am such a fan. Question: I am a real late bloomer as far as planning for retirement. Besides the company 401k and a couple of small Roth IRAs, I'm interested in starting to slowly buy stocks. As a true beginner, I don't know where to start. I'm talking very small purchases, so I don't think it warrants anyone's time to help me out. I just do not have a clue as to where to begin. Of course, because I'm so behind the ball, I shouldn't be too risky, but I don't want to be too conservative. I haven't spent a lot of time. I'm 58 years old, single. Any advice would be appreciated." Stephanie, why are you going to buy individual stocks? Are you maxing out your company 401k? Are you maxing out your Roth IRA? Unless that's the case, then no, you shouldn't do this. If you are maxing both of these things out, then why buy stocks? Why not just go and buy a couple of index funds and call it a day? I don't know if this is just a learning thing. You could try the Charles Schwab. What were those called? Slices or snacks or something like that. They've got some, you can buy little pieces of companies, but I don't recommend this. I really don't. I stick to the boring old basics. That's what I would do. Okay, it's Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, don't forget, send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. Hey, during the break, why don't you go to the website, jillonmoney.com, and sign up for our free weekly newsletter. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome back. It's hour number 2 of Jill on Money. We are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. Well, we've got a treat for you this hour. I love answering your questions, so don't stop the questions from coming. But we would like to pause and take a breath here and do a little career reboot. And we have decided that we have 2 great interviews to run. The first one is with Kristi Hedges, and she has written a book called The Inspiration Code: How the Best Leaders Energize People Every Day. Who does not want to be energized right now? Who needs a little bit of leadership guidance now more than ever? In this segment, Kristi identifies the key element to make you a great leader. Here's our interview with Kristi Hedges. Why'd you write this book?
Well, like I think a lot of things that we get inspired by, it came a little bit out of left field. And this is really the true story of what happened. I was, I'm a leadership coach. I work with executives and professionals. And I wrote this book called The Power of Presence, and that came out in 2011. And when I wrote that book, I started going out and doing more workshops around the content and talking to large groups and such. And, when you go out and talk to these groups, you hope that they're there anxiously waiting for your wisdom. But in reality, as we know, people are sitting there going sort of, prove something to me, lady, and what do you have to tell me? And so I would try to warm up the audience a little bit, and I wanted to get them kind of talking about, what personal qualities they knew in people that they admired or who had inspired them, and how that linked to presence. That's really what I was going for. So I would ask this question: who inspired you, and what did they do? And what I found was the mood of the room when people would discuss the answer to this question would dramatically shift. And people would light up, and they would get animated, and they would gesture, and their eyes would shine. And they looked like a group of people that could tackle anything when just a couple minutes before they looked like they were barely awake. And so and then people would talk about these people that inspired them, and they would go on and on and on about these certain qualities. And I started seeing the same qualities come up a lot. And I got really curious about it. So I spent the next 5 years really trying to understand, what do inspiring people actually do that puts that kind of light in others.
And what did you find? I mean, because inspiration comes from lots of different people, places, events. What is it that were some of the traits or the elements of inspiration that really resonated with these people?
Well, they can come from a lot of things. They're triggers, as the social scientists who study inspiration tell us. There are triggering events or triggering incidents that inspire us. Most of the time, though, those triggering incidents are conversations. And when I looked at, hundreds of conversations over the years with leaders talking about people who've inspired them, it really came down to 4 basic things that people did. And I call this the Inspire Path in the book. And they were present. They were very personal in terms of how they communicated. They were passionate. They showed passion. They aroused passion in other people. And they were very purposeful.
So I'm wondering, is there a point in your life or where you are, does that influence whether you're able to be inspired or not? Or do you think that may come during times of tragedy where you're so vulnerable and raw, you'll hear the message? What do you think about those ideas?
Well, what the researchers will tell you is that inspiration actually isn't an event. There are a couple things that are sort of colliding and happening at the same time. One is that we are, they call it transcendence. We see something different that we hadn't seen before. So that's kind of this triggering event. And the other one is receptiveness. We're open to it. And that's why, I always talk about the Eckhart Tolle book as an example here, where I read it in my 20s and I thought, what is this guy talking about? And then I read it in my 40s and I thought, this guy's a genius, right? I understand everything. Like, I just wasn't receptive in my 20s. I wasn't there.
That's how I feel about Stephen Sondheim. It took me a long time to get there, but I got there big time.
Yeah, you get there, but you got to be receptive. And the last one they call an approach motivation, which is that that's that fire in your belly. Like, I'm going to do something about this, right? You can feel it. And so certainly that receptiveness piece has a role. And now here's the thing about inspiration, and I'm very clear about this in the book and it's very clear in the research. You can't force it. Like, you can't go in and say, okay, I'm going to inspire everybody in this room today, before I'm gone. That backfires. What you can do is you can foster inspiration. So that receptiveness piece, you're fostering it, right? You're laying a foundation. People decide for themselves if they're going to be inspired.
Half of the people say behavior that had the greatest impact was when the person listened to them. This was the most cited inspirational behavior. Are we bad listeners, especially in corporate America?
Oh, we're terrible listeners in corporate America. We're terrible listeners in general. I think we're getting worse as well, because we have more distraction than we ever have. And I think that we sort of have deluded ourselves that we can half listen and that does the job. So that statistic surprised me too. So what I did is I had this qualitative research, and then I commissioned a Harris Poll study to do some quantitative research around it, and look at what the behaviors were, make sure I wasn't missing anything, and then kind of rank order them in a way, see which ones were most important. And I really thought, after having spent 20 years in and around the field of communication, that the number one quality surely would be something about the way we express ourselves. And so that one, I really sat on that one for a while and took it to heart. But it really is listening. And, if you look at, in organizations, I'm exposed to a lot of leadership development programs. It is so rare that I see anything about listening in those programs. Maybe it's a side point in a greater conversation about, motivation or something along those lines. But we don't train people how to listen. And it's a funny thing, because listening done well feels a lot like love. It feels like support. It feels like acknowledgement. It feels like caring. It feels like all these things wrapped up in one. And it's actually not that hard to do. We just have to learn how to do it.
So how can we become better listeners? Or if someone's listening to this and they're engaged, and they say, oh, my God, I have to be a better listener. What do I need to do? What are some steps to take that would make me better at just being focused and listening? Is it obviously put down your device? Mm-hmm. What's next?
So there are 2 things come to mind. So the first one is, yes, put down your device, is we're actually better listeners if we tell people ahead of time that we're going to be present. Okay, so that sounds crazy, right?
Yeah, so you're setting the expectation.
You're setting the expectation. So that does a couple of things. It provides an outspoken commitment that then we're going to step into. We're more likely to step into, and it changes the dynamic. So if you think about, you go into your boss's office, and if your boss says, you know what, I'm going to make sure I want to turn down my email and shut off my phone and close the door because this conversation is really important and I want to focus on it. You can see how that automatically shifts the conversation and the energy in the room. So that's an easy one, right? We just don't do it, but just making the proclamation, if you will. The other one is that we need to shift our listening. And I talk about shifts we can do that are pretty simple in the book. And I'll give you an example of one. I say, shift from listening to judge to listen to out of curiosity, to really understand. And so what does that mean? We're really good at analysis. So generally when we go into a conversation, we're sort of listening to really judge what's going on, to get to the bottom of it, especially at work, right? We want to solve that problem and solve it quick. Instead of doing that, if we can shift our listening to say, okay, I'm just going to spend this next half an hour and I'm just going to be curious about what actually happened here in this situation. You ask different questions. You ask curious, maybe open-ended questions, and you learn differently. And so, and there's subtle shifts like that we can make that make us much better listeners.
We'll get back to our interview with Kristi Hedges in just a moment. If you have a question, you can give us a holler. It's Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Or if you're on the website, just click the contact button. It's in the upper right-hand corner. We'll be right back.
Back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger helps you take the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And this hour, we are focusing on you and your career. I know some of you may have gone through some rough times. Maybe you have been furloughed or maybe you're unemployed right now. But a lot of the advice that we are going to offer you this hour is going to apply to wherever you are in your life. In this next segment, we want to discuss how you can be your better self, how you can be authentic. It sure does feel hard when you are speaking to people on the phone or doing Zoom calls, all of these things. It makes it hard. Like, how authentic do you want me to be? Can I wear a baseball hat even though it's a business meeting? We're going to get into what it takes for you to kind of be your best self. And that's just not at work. It's everywhere. So here is the rest of our interview with Kristi Hedges.
So I used to own a company and I had some employees and there are times where it was hard for me to listen for the subtext because maybe I didn't really want to tackle that issue in the moment, but I knew it was there. So would you encourage me as my coach to say, like, get over it, Jill, and deal with it because it's there already? You might as well deal with it. Because sometimes it's like, oh, I know that there's like a bigger issue that looms. And the bigger issue may be like, I need to manage this person out. Or the bigger issue may be that, like, I just can't deal with this. I have 500 million things going on. What do I do if I'm in that conversation? I know what the subtext is, but I actually consciously don't want to deal with it. Is that bad? Or this is very judgy, but, or should I get over it and deal with it in the moment?
Well, so I'm glad you asked that question because that is a very real occurrence. And there's a couple of answers I would say to that. One is that not every conversation is an inspiring conversation. Right? Sometimes we just need to get work done and move on. And that's okay. Right? Those are transactional conversations. This is what makes the world go round. We got to do it. What we're talking about here are a very specific way to have a conversation and listen and really build connection. And so when you said that, what I thought about is, because I used to have a lot of employees as well, and there's always these sort of HR issues that you can ask. And that's a different situation. So there are times when, if I were coaching you, I would say, I would be listening. My subtext would be, how much is this conversation? How much does it need to happen for you to advance whatever you want to advance? And if it's hindering something that you're trying to do, if it's dragging your team down, if you're going home and being frustrated about it every single day, then I would encourage you to get the subtext on the table.
Do you find that the workers really want to be inspired? Are you like the vast majority of people, like when they go to work, they say, that's what I'm lacking? Can they say that in the moment?
I think we all want to be inspired.
You do?
I believe this to my core. I believe that We want to feel a sense of purpose and energy and engagement in our work. We spend a lot of time there in our lives. And I know that because we've all had a sense of it. I mean, I shouldn't say all. Most of us, by far, are lucky enough to have had a sense of being really inspired by what we do. And we know what it feels like when it's gone. Because you hear these, you hear common conversations. I feel stagnant. I don't feel like, I'm not engaged in my work anymore. I'm not motivated. I mean, that's the opposite side of inspiration. However, I will tell you what I think people don't want more of. A small group of people comes up with a vision for the organization and then rolls it out to everybody with great fanfare, and then everybody sort of nods and smiles and goes on their way. And that doesn't really change their behavior at all, because it feels like something that's being forced on them versus something they're electing to do. And again, they're trying to do a good thing. It's just that's not what motivates us. That's not what inspires us. What inspires us are these personal, interpersonal exchanges and conversations we have, a lot of times with the people that we report to, but not always, that make us engaged at work.
I think what's another concept that you say is like sort of the real, like having like real meaning at work is this concept that people keep saying like, be your authentic self. And I love that you basically say like, you cannot be your authentic self at work necessarily. And maybe it's not appropriate to be. And I think you're quoting someone else about adaptively authentic. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So, again, I think a lot of these ideas are good at their core. Authenticity, I mean, we sort of being a whole person at work and not feeling like you have to put, a big part of your personality aside. These are all great goals. And I think our workplaces have come a long way in that regard, for sure. But, authenticity isn't, the reason I say it's adaptive is because we have to look at our environment as well and say, how does me being my authentic self match up with the environment that I'm in a way that, furthers me for my goals or what I want to do. And often we adopt new behaviors that after we have them for a while become authentic. And so that's what that idea is. So if I'm somebody who doesn't think I'm very good in meetings, but part of my role is to run meetings very effectively, if I really apply myself and try some new things in a year or so, I'm going to feel pretty authentic about running meetings. And so we have to be open to the fact that what feels uncomfortable for us at one point might feel very authentic at another point.
Do you think that the passion of the leader is a double-edged sword sometimes? I'm thinking about sometimes the startup culture where the passion gets you on board. It's amazing. But that passion is also kind of baloney on some level sometimes, and it falls apart. And then, it almost feels like, oh, so what was that passion thing? Is that delusion also? I mean, how does that play out when you think about passion?
I worked with a company a while ago where there was a new CEO brought in. And the company had gone through sort of a lot of different changes. And people there were pretty cynical and frustrated and stressed out. And there's a lot of passive-aggressive resistance in the organization. But I didn't meet with the people first. First, I met with the CEO. And he was very passionate and almost ebullient. And I met him and I left. I was like, this guy's awesome, right? He's going to do anything he wants to do. And then I met with some of the people who reported to him. And their response was, who is this guy? Right? He's so far out there from where we are. He's got a Pollyanna attitude. He's not down to earth. We don't know what's going on with him. His passion was so outpaced from where everybody else was that he'd lost them. And so he needed to come towards the middle, right? And so you can't get too far ahead. You need to be a little bit ahead of people in terms of energetically where you're trying to take them. But if you're too far ahead, people just can't metabolize your energy, if you will. And so I think that happens a lot in startups, right? Everybody starts at that same level. Oh, we're going to take on the world. And then the leader kind of keeps going off into the stratosphere because they're out there talking to people outside of the organization who are just pumping them up, and their passion just blows and blooms. And then you have everybody else back in the office who's dealing with the fact that the servers aren't working and all this kind of stuff. And that starts to look like it's not the same. There's a divide almost in the energy or the passion of the organization.
I always think that, especially with these large publicly traded companies, it is always confounding to me the way that they say, oh, I have a fiduciary responsibility to my shareholders. It's like they put their shareholders ahead of their employees. And I've always had a hard time with that. I don't know why. I mean, I get it that the shareholders are important, but I remember years ago I did a piece and I interviewed the CEO of the Container Store. And it was so striking to me because he had this culture from the company. The staff loved working there. They were like the most incredible cheerleaders, the raving fans of their own organization. And he was very blunt. He said, look, I'm an outlier for a publicly traded company. To me, the number one most important constituency, that's my employees. Number two is my customers. And number three is my shareholder. And I believe that's the right order. And he said, and I believe that's the right order because if my people are happy, they treat my customers well, my customers are happy, the customers keep shopping here, then they fulfill the promise to the shareholders. And yet many organizations, it's the other way around. Shareholders, customers, employees. Has that been a shift that you've seen out there? And also I'm wondering if that has changed because I feel like we used to be much more employee-centric as in the workplace.
Yeah, well, so I think we've seen a couple shifts. We've seen that the employee to shareholder shift, and now I think you've seen another trend where organizations are trying to recapture that a little bit. Some just do it by words, but we have to. When you said that about shareholders or employees, I think what people miss is that it's a loop. There isn't one or the other. It's all part of the same dynamic. If you're good to these audiences, then they're going to be good to your shareholders.
Thanks to Kristi Hedges. And in our next couple of segments, we've got another great guest, and we are going to talk more about the things you need to do to build up your network. And boy, that's going to be important now. Maybe you got a little free time on your hands. So stay tuned. It's Jill on Money. We'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And in this hour, we are focusing on you and your career. And if you're retired, don't worry. This will all come back to you. This will feel good. It's interesting stuff anyway. Our next guest wrote a book that I just thought was kind of fun because she was very clear about how networking is sort of a rough word. Her name is Pat Hedley. The book is called Meet 100 People, a how-to guide to the career and life edge everyone is missing. She's got a lot of advice here. She also helps us kind of get over our fear of networking. Of course, I am not one of those people who has that fear. That said, if you do feel like you need a little hand-holding, this is going to be the perfect couple of segments for you. It's a real no-baloney approach to how you can build out your network. Now more than ever, having a network. You don't know what's going to happen next in your career. You don't know what's going to happen in your job. This is vitally important. So here's the first part of our interview with Pat Hedley.
You are now an advisor and an investor in growth companies, and you like to focus specifically on women entrepreneurs. But you've also written this book called Meet 100 People, a how-to guide to the career and life edge everyone's missing. Pat, there's no way you wrote this to become a famous author or to make money. So why'd you write this?
I wrote this because this is advice I would have liked to have gotten when I was first starting out. I did not have a network. I had to build it. It took time to build it, and I saw the benefits of it. I also think that it's really one of the secrets to very successful people, and it's a secret that's hidden in plain sight. It's right there, and most people don't recognize it. And I especially find it true with millennials and young people that they have a reluctance, almost a fear, of meeting people in person.
What's that about? Is that because they grew up, they're growing up in a digital world, or is there something that we can ascribe and make it their parents' fault, that their parents have infantilized them because they've been doing everything for them?
I would say it's a little bit more of the former. I think our culture and society has evolved to the extent where we are digitally well-networked, and millennials are the most digitally well-networked generation ever. My kids have hundreds of Facebook friends. They are starting to link into people. I find both Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter to be incredibly helpful and valuable. It's good, but it's not sufficient.
So don't ask your boss for a raise via email.
Never.
Ever.
Never. No. I also found that with young people, they get very nervous about getting jobs. And there is pressure to go through the process of job interviewing. And I would say to those parents of children who are going through that, because they also share their concern, that you have to reframe a job search and think of it more as meeting people. And if you think of it that way, what you're doing is you're learning. You're getting advice. You're getting information. You're becoming more confident. And a job will result. If you meet 100 people and you're looking for a job, you will get a job. I mean, it will happen. But you have to go through the process of doing that.
So let's talk about the process. So I think that you're talking about millennials, but I also think there's plenty of older workers who are just not quite comfortable doing this. And so for you old farts out there like me, you can walk us through both stages. Because the funny thing is that I always, people will say to me like, oh, you're naturally an extrovert. Of course this is easy for you. And it is, okay? So I get that. But speak to whether it's the millennial or it's a Gen X or a baby boomer who's a little shy, a little bit of an introvert. Where to start?
Sure. And I totally understand this because I am an introvert. And I think coming from me, it probably comes across a little bit differently. I understand those feelings. I understand the reluctance. But I've also become self-aware, and I know that what drives me is curiosity. I love to learn. So my natural reluctance and slight fear is overcome by the fact that I know I'm going to get something that really excites me at the other end of meeting people. I actually love to meet people now because I learn from every single person. Everybody knows something that I don't know. And the only way I get to increasing my own knowledge and expertise is by talking to people and meeting people.
Do you have a standard set of questions that you rely on when you're meeting with someone new?
My goal is to learn about the other person. So if I can ask questions that are in the theme of, how did you get to where you are? What do you enjoy about your job? What are the lessons you've learned? What is the advice you would give to me? And then, and this is the important part, and then really listen to the answers, I'm going to benefit and learn. And anyone will benefit and learn from that experience, whether you're just starting out or whether you were like me 3 years ago, where I left the job that I had been at for 30 years and I had to recreate my network.
So let's get back to you're a shy millennial, you're a shy Gen Xer. It feels awful to even think about this. This word networking is a terrible word anyway, because it has lots of connotations and people are like, oh, gross. And you say, let your natural curiosity guide you. But how do you balance that? You may be very curious, but you're scared. How do you get over the hump of the fear?
Sure. And let's talk about what these young people or older people are afraid of, because I will get to the core of it. They are afraid that it's hard, that they don't know how to do it, that they will be rejected, that people will say no. Those 3 things in particular. First of all, it's hard if nobody's really explained how to do it to you. People tell you to network. Nobody tells you how. The second, it's hard. It's not that hard. It's actually much easier than you think. It seems overwhelming, and my title is a little intimidating, meet 100 people. But you know what? You start with one. You start with one person, and you don't start with the most intimidating person you can think of. You start with somebody in your first-degree network, somebody with whom you have strong ties, the dad of your best friend, the mom of, your aunt, whoever it is. And you start to practice, and you talk to them. And you go to them not saying, I need a job. You go to them saying, I'm here to learn. I love what you've done in your career. Tell me about it.
We'll get back to our interview with Pat Hedley in just a second. Hey, during the break, why don't you go to the website, JillOnMoney.com. Sign up for our free weekly newsletter right there. And you can also subscribe to our podcast. Conveniently, it's called Jill on Money. That's all you need to know. Jill on Money. Okay, we'll be right back.
401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and it is the summer doldrums. You may feel it. You may feel the doldrums of just feeling like, oh, I can't concentrate on anything except the virus, the spread, the unemployment rate, any of these things that are going on. But how about tackling something that you can control? And for that, we've got a great guest. Her name is Pat Hedley. And we talked about networking with her, but I think in this segment, it's really important to understand how so many of you are going to turn to freelancing and gig work. And maybe you're going to supplement some money that you have been missing because your boss has cut back on your hours or asked you to take a reduction in pay. Well, if you're going to jump into the world of freelancing, you must do so with your eyes wide open, of course. And also know that there are certain aspects of the world of working for yourself that just get down to good manners. What is the critical aspect of being a great worker, freelancer, gig worker? Might surprise you. Here's the rest of our interview with Pat Hedley.
If the follow-up occurs, you send the follow-up, how do you then make this somebody who really is part of your network? What should you be doing after that?
There's several things that you can do. And just to preface it, of the 100 people you meet, if you go ahead on this project and do that, not every single person is going to be helpful to you right away. And that's okay. Understand that. People can be helpful to you later in your life. I tell the story of one man, and this is an important story. He gave me one of my first rejections when I was recruiting for jobs. He called me. We had a great interview. I really liked him. He called me up and he said, Pat, you're not moving forward. And we talked a little bit and I hung up the phone. He did it in such a nice way that I didn't feel badly about it. What do you know? 2 years later, he's the banker presenting to my company. I'm on the other side of the table. After that, he comes to me for career advice when I was in a position where I was able to help him with that. And since then, in the last 3 years, he introduced me to a company. We both invested. It was a great opportunity. This is a man who said no to me. So if somebody says no to you, don't despair. You met a person who could come back in your life in ways that you cannot foresee. You cannot foresee it. So that's the serendipity piece. What else can you do? If you are looking for a job and you're meeting people as part of informational meetings and perhaps interviews, tell them what happened next. When you land a job, go back to all those people and say, thank you so much for having spent time with me. I ended up working for X company and I'd love to stay in touch.
Let's kind of play this out. So you're meeting these people. Let's pretend it's more of the job search part of it, right? You and I have a meeting. We have a meeting. It's a great meeting. You're the boss. I've met you. I follow up. Thank you. Now, when do I bug you again?
Well, if I haven't given you any information and I said I would, then it's fine to follow up a week later and say, I just wanted to check in and see how things were going. Then it's incumbent upon me to be pretty transparent and say, there really isn't an opportunity here, but touch base with me in 3 months, 6 months.
Right. Let the other person define that.
Let the other person define it as well. So it is a give and take, but it doesn't happen unless you are proactive. This is the one thing that I really don't like young people saying. I don't want to send them a note because I don't want to bother them. You are not bothering people by sending a follow-up note. You are not bothering them by asking them a question. You shouldn't send them, 10 emails within a week, okay? There are limits to that. But one, email and saying, I just thought I'd check back in. Mm-hmm. That's okay.
You know what? It's funny. Part of my life was spent selling. And a lot of this is soft selling skills, which are taught to you when you learn how to sell.
Right.
But all of a sudden, selling became sort of a bad thing in this current iteration of business. Like, no one wants to raise his hand and say, or her hand and say, I'm a salesperson with pride. And I think that's actually a shame, because I think the skills you learn as a salesperson are the skills that will really carry you through so much of your life.
These are simple guidelines, and they are related to sales. And I will argue, and I do in my book, that a large 5% of us will participate in the gig economy. We will be freelancers. If you do not know how to market yourselves and your skills, you're going to starve. It's going to be much harder. You need to be able to get out there and do this. And I agree with you. At the very beginning of this, you said networking is kind of like a term that doesn't have the right connotations. And as I was writing the book, I was thinking, I wish there were another word for this. What I am talking about is building relationships, establishing connections. And I think it's accessible, joyful, and life-affirming. That is not what people think about when they think of networking. And yet it can be that. I so passionately believe that this is what networking really is. It's about building relationships. And even if I got my job right away, I didn't have to interview much, and I'm in my job and I'm like super smart and successful, I would argue you have to network. And even if you're not looking for a job, you have to network. You have to meet people within your firm. You have to meet peers similar to you outside your firm, and you have to meet people who are very different than you are to become smarter and more aware. You have to be the journalist of your life, and the only way to do that is by talking to people.
Thanks again to Pat Hedley and also to Kristi Hedges. We have links to their books on our show notes. If you would like to find that, just go to jillonmoney.com and you can click on the Listen tab and everything will be there for you. We've got time for one more segment, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. We are broadcasting from the Policy Genius virtual studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. It's very easy. Before we finish up the program, let's do one more email. How about that? Brad writes that I enjoy reading your column in the Chicago Tribune. My wife and I filed this year's taxes in the middle of June. Because we were over $200,000 in income in 2018, we were not eligible for the economic impact payment, that $1,200 per person stimulus check. However, for 2019, our income went down to $165,000. I think that amount qualifies us for the original benefits, albeit not the entire $2,400 per couple. How do I pursue my check, or does the government get an update and automatically send me a check? My daughter is a senior in college who turned 21 years old on January 25th. Does she qualify for anything? She's a senior in college. No, she's not going to get anything. You guys, it should happen automatically. That said, I would stay on top of it, because I think that as the IRS starts to open up offices, as they get more people and more of their systems in place, that these things will be automated. I doubt that you will get this anytime soon, but you never know. I don't want to be all Debbie Downer on you. It should happen automatically based on the filing of the 2019 return, and stay on top of it like everything else with the IRS, right? Okay, that's it. That is the program. Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget, all week long, there are so many different ways to get in touch with us. You can email us. You can go to our website, Jill on Money, and you can always start downloading our daily podcast. How could you not be doing this? Every single day, a little bit of Jill and Mark. It's just a lovely thing. Now, of course, don't forget, wash your hands, wear your masks, maintain that physical distancing. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not let down our guards. Too much is riding on it, not just your health, but our collective health, our collective economic outlook. All of this has to do with our ability to really come together and do these things. That said, we'll talk to you next week.